It's showtime. Hello, team. It's alive. I haven't spoken to you guys live for ages, and I really feel that. This is probably an ill-advised live because I've just got back from the public house after having a couple of pints with Dell, who does the stats, as you know, the OneDrive linked Excel spreadsheet stats that I often share with you. He tots up the general staff figures on a daily basis and presents them really usefully for us all. And he lives locally. He's just moving away, to be honest. He lives locally at the moment, and he popped down to my local and had a pint with Dell and his great son Liam. So here's a big hello to Liam. If he's watching this, I doubt he is, but you never know. Paul Gilbert has his cuppa ready. I unfortunately don't. I was thinking, having had 2 pints, if I got a cuppa as well, I'd be having to hot skip it to the gents for a quick, yeah. So that's not going to happen. Now, I'm going to go through military aid stuff. I'm going to go through geopolitics stuff and do a little bit of an update on Kursk. I am going to start doing my mapping as of tonight onwards. It's going to be a bit of a big one because I haven't done mapping for so long. I really apologize that I haven't had a chance to get mapping done for a long time. It's where the cookie crumbles. Holiday got in the way. So yeah, that's the nature of the beast. Right, let's go. Matt's going to join us in a bit, which is absolutely fantastic. Matt Bishop, really good to be back in the seat with you guys. So it just felt like a long time. So I thought, let's do a live. Right, we're going to start with the military aid news and the news that the Biden administration will send about $125 million in new military aid to Ukraine soon. It includes air defense missiles, munitions for HIMARS, javelins, and an array of other anti-armor missiles, counter-drone and counter-electronic warfare systems and equipment, 155mm and 105mm artillery ammunition, vehicles and other equipment. So that is a normal sort of package that we've come to expect from the US. That doesn't seem too exciting, but it's absolutely necessary for Ukraine to continue doing what it does. It can't operate on the front lines, defending or attacking, without these kind of packages. Now, I was talking recently how I was expecting a package with Bradleys to be on there. They have lost a number of Bradleys recently, and they definitely need a restocking with Bradleys, but that doesn't seem to be on the cards at the moment. But maybe it will happen going forward at some point. Yeah, I do apologize for going on holidays, Doug, but it does, happen occasionally, and not enough, but it happens once in a while. So the US is not against Ukraine's counterattack with US weapons in Kursk and Sumy regions, according to the Pentagon spokesperson Singh. We'll return to this in the Kursk section in a little while. My personal opinion is the US would probably have put the kibosh on this Kursk incursion, which is why the Americans weren't told by the Ukrainians. And as a result, the Ukrainians were very successful and didn't have any constrictions. And I think the US has had to go along with it now. I think this is a really good move by the Ukrainians, forcing the hand of the Americans here, making them toe the party line. So yeah, it's good that they are supporting that, though. I mean, they could have said otherwise. I don't think it was plausible for them to have done so. Now, here's an image of an inflatable decoy of an F-16 fighter jet with the Ukrainian symbols at the DALO Industry Days in Denmark. What this suggests is that Ukraine, I assume, will be utilizing, as they have done with other planes and other pieces of equipment, utilizing inflatable decoys, anything to try and attract expensive weaponry away from the real McCoy, and also to just attract expensive weaponry to be used. The UNHCR, so human rights, basically human rights courts, is to allocate $30 million to support Ukraine's frontline areas in winter times. Not human rights. What's it? UNHCR. You guys will let me know. My brain has gone completely dead. Anyway, that's allocating 30 million to support Ukraine's frontline areas in winter. That is important because winter is going to hurt. Energy is fragile. The energy infrastructure in Ukraine is fragile, although we'll come back to that subject matter in a second because, well, I'll let you know now. Ukraine apparently are starting to export energy again. It's amazing that Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been hammered so much that they've begun importing energy, and yet they've been able to turn that around and start exporting energy again. Fantastic. Although they have lost so much capacity from the network. Absolutely incredible. Sorry, just laughing, Frank. Thank you so much, Frank. Towards the next coconut whiskey, I was just saying that I got some coconut rum from the little whiskey shop in Stockbridge, which is where Mark, one of the organisers of my talk in Stockbridge, has a little shop, and I'm trying to get people to send some business his way because he's such an awesome human being. And yeah, he's got a great little shop, and I've bought a nice flavored gin from my missus from there as well, as that's her poison. So thanks, Frank. That's really, really kind. Really appreciate that, mate. Okay, and that's from Australia by the looks of it. So, oops, there you go. Some Australian love. Thanks also to Kevin as well, who has gifted some ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, Kevin. He's such a wonderful supporter of the channel and contributor to the comments and whatnot. So thanks, mate. So we have heard that the UK gave 30 robotic dogs to the Ukrainian armed forces. Robotic dogs being used by the Ukrainian armed forces. I meant to show this the other day. I think I forgot to show this. Operators stated that the Ukrainian military already has 30 of these dogs, which can perform tasks that would otherwise require multiple technical systems and at least 3 to 5 soldiers. On the one hand, you might have these soldiers' unions complaining that they're losing jobs to robotic dogs. On the other hand, there's not enough soldiers to fill up the ranks of the soldiers' unions. So I'm merely jesting. These I don't know how useful they are, what sort of jobs they can do. I'm super surprised that they have advanced enough already to be utilized on the front line by Ukrainian soldiers. It's incredible the leaps and bounds that drones are taking, both in the air, on the surface of the water, and on ground. The leaps and bounds they are taking, we have seen in real time R&D be improved, successful in changing and evolving the battlefield before our very eyes. So that's quite incredible. Okay, moving on to Latvia. So Latvia will transfer 1,400 drones to Ukraine. According to the Latvian Minister of Defense, this is the largest batch of drones from local manufacturers. Remember, I often talk to you about how giving equipment to Ukraine isn't a charity. It is in the strategic interests of the countries that give that stuff. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And it is not only in the strategic interest, but can be in the economic interests as well. So money being spent by Latvia on local drone manufacturing, giving jobs and tax dollars back to the state and jobs to their citizens. And those drones then get exported and given to Ukraine. So this is the largest batch of drones from local manufacturers. In total, the country has provided Ukrainian forces with 3,000 drones of various types and characteristics as part of the drone coalition. So that's a drone coalition run by both the UK and Latvia. They are the main nations in charge of that drone coalition. Now, this is a great little image that someone sent me. It was actually put onto me by Rick. Rick, who lives in Pompey, local to me. He knows of a Ukrainian artist, and this, as we're talking about drones, I think it'll be nice to just discuss this. This is a wonderful image of a dandelion but actually all those dandelion seeds are drones, hexacopters. Just a really good. I love that image, and that's Maria Gordieva. So go and find Maria Gordieva on Facebook. This has come from Facebook. Go and find it. Go and find her on Facebook. Give her a follow, and look at some of the art that she is producing with regard to. No, it's not AI generated. I believe it is art. It is her art that she is producing, as someone has asked that. So I think that's a pretty cool image, and there are similar things like that. So go and hunt out Maria Gordieva on Facebook. Right. Anyway, back to the military aid. So this is something that I have suggested. I suggested this like a year plus ago. Not that that's worth anything, but it doesn't surprise me that this has happened. So Euromaidan Press reports the Witches and Valkyries, an all-female air defense group or groups, are operating near Kiev and successfully downing Shaheeds. The old Maxim machine gun proved surprisingly effective. So that is the old Maxim there, double Maxim machine gun there. The old Maxim machine gun proved surprisingly effective. They have good accuracy and don't overheat. We use paired Maxims, allowing quick ammunition changes. They're practically always in battle, their colonel explains. The results are impressive. In just 1 month, 2 out of 3 Shahed drones were shot down using Maxims on a contemporary pickup truck. Valentina joined 2 months ago, and after conquering initial physical challenges, she now bears this call sign Valkyrie. My place is here, she says. She asserts this war won't end without us. We can take up arms to defend our land and community. The group's stories are diverse and poignant. Some have lost husbands in combat. Others await loved ones return from captivity. Some have lived through occupation. Some, like Angelina, just want to support their loved ones on the front. Her boyfriend is in the infantry, and she joined the air defense unit this summer. My boyfriend is nervous but supportive, she shares. He knows we're doing the same work, just differently. Now, what I think is important about the interesting stories and whatnot, but just from a practical point of view, Ukraine need boots on the ground, and you can argue that women can fulfill the same roles as men in most areas of the armed forces, maybe all areas of the armed forces, or you might argue they can't. Or older people, older men and older women can fulfill a role and can help. So my position has always been that there's no point having fit young men, for example, operating on these mobile air defense groups when you could have a slightly overweight older man or woman doing that job. And if you're struggling to get boots on the ground, then you can fill some of these roles with alternatives. And those people who are better suited to frontline operations can be moved to the front line. And it doesn't surprise me that you get an all-female group like this. And I would suggest that this happens more, and it probably is happening more, because it seems perfectly sensible that if you're just driving around a truck and shooting stuff out of the air, you don't need to be the fittest human being or the strongest human being or this or that. So I don't want to get into the argument as to whether women can fulfill infantry roles in trenches, and I'm sure there are many female soldiers that are doing so, but the general principle of being able to supply certain unit roles with alternatives than people who are most fit for the front line, I think it's really important to be able to do that. Now, War Translated's Dmitry here says the Russian media outlet Meduza reported that the Kremlin has begun discussing the announcement of a new wave of mobilization. I've not heard anything about this, though, but my goodness, I've been expecting this for a long time if it does happen. But rumors due to the advance of Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region. However, the Russian government and state-affiliated businessmen are opposed to mobilization, as it would deplete the economy of its remaining labor resources. Now, of course, we know just going through the military news, so we know that there's been a labor shortage both in Ukraine and in Russia, a labor shortage as a result of people being sent to the front lines and people dying on the front lines or being injured on the front lines, and that causes huge issues, knock-on effects into the economy, into tax revenues, into all sorts of areas. And you can imagine that a further national mobilization will cause business leaders to cap themselves and people, depending on the economy, to be well functioning, to be rather nervous. Not only will a mass national mobilization be deeply unpopular kind of politically and socially, but also economically. So I don't know whether this is something that is going to happen. It's something, if you were Russian or pro-Russian, you would be calling out for a national mobilization, because there is no way Russia can achieve anything beyond what they're presently doing, which is not an awful lot, without mobilizing. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Sorry, JP. I was paying attention to my right, of course.
So do you think Russia will mobilize?
Yes. I don't think they have a choice. I think they're not able to keep the pressure on. They're obviously showing in Kursk that they're dropping the ball, trying to pretend it's not important or whatever you want to say. But yeah, they need to mobilize. And if they mobilize, it's going to be the end for Russia. So
yeah. So my view has long been this, but it has not changed. In fact, it's interesting that most of my views on the war in Ukraine have not changed in 2.5 years. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but sometimes I get imposter syndrome and I think, do I know what I'm talking about? And actually, broadly speaking, I've predicted certain things that appear to be still correct, such as Russia had lost this war within the first week. The question is, can Ukraine win it? And those are two very different things. But there's no way Russia. So, like I've said a million times to you guys before, Russia started this war as a special military operation, and they expected to turn the government into a Russian puppet government, and that would take 3 days with 15 days to clear up the mess. That would have given them control of the whole of Ukraine. Right? They didn't need to go to war. They were just going to get rid of the government, assassinate Zelensky, or whatever. However it worked out, he would flee to another country. They would control the whole of Ukraine. Since that didn't happen, Zelensky stayed in Kiev, and the army put up enough of a resistance to initially repel the Russians. They were stuck in a war, and this is a war they had not planned for. And since they hadn't planned for it, they didn't have a strategy to achieve the initial objective, which was controlling the whole of Ukraine. You couldn't militarily control the whole of Ukraine. You could only win that politically. And the special military operation literally wasn't a war. It was trying to install a government of their choice. And that was the only way of controlling the whole of Ukraine. You couldn't do that with the number of troops that Russia has at their disposal. Even though that's a lot of troops, that's a huge amount of land, and to forcibly occupy that would require some insane numbers of troops. Now, as a result, we are 2.5 years later, and my thoughts are that Russia doesn't really quite know what its objectives are still, because it can't achieve what it initially wanted to achieve. So therefore, what's it trying to achieve? Well, maybe as much land as possible in a kind of frantic land grab, so that they can just keep hold of what they got. But if you want to take it beyond just keeping hold of what they got, the main objective for them would be, in my opinion, taking territory to Transnistria. So this land corridor here, which means that the Ukrainians would not have any coastal areas. They'd have no export capacity through any ports, because Russia would control all of this land. Now, Russia are really struggling to take Kursk. They cannot repel the Ukrainians in their own country of Kursk, own country at Kursk. So they have a cat's chance in hell of getting to Transnistria, which means that in order to achieve anything beyond just staying broadly where they're at, they have to mobilize. But in order to mobilize, they would implode economically. And this is a huge dilemma for the Russians, and is another reason why I don't think they can win this war, because the only chance they've got of achieving anything beyond a bit of meh is I was not to say meh, like if they hold on to what they've got, that's a problem for Ukraine. But in terms of what Russia would like, any chance they've got, there has to be a mobilization, and the mobilization would be suicide for them. Anything to add to that, mate?
I was just thinking about what you were saying about going down the south. Then I don't think Russia's actually going to be able to hold that. I
No, well,
really
no,
don't.
absolutely.
I'm I'm expecting. Okay, so when the Kursk invasion started, I said I remember speaking to my wife and saying, right, okay, now they're going to come in over there from the west, cut across, do a nice line, and then they're going to swing down south very hard, very fast. And so we're just waiting for that next step now. And if they do that, I think Russia's basically going to panic, like seriously panic, and they don't have the equipment, I don't think, to hold
Yeah,
it. Although
yeah,
Zelensky was saying the other day that they still don't have half the equipment. So
yeah.
that might be limiting Ukraine, but yeah.
I was speaking to Dell today, and Dell was saying that he had heard that there were quite a lot of troops that have gone through the training now, and quite a bit of equipment
Mm.
that's sitting waiting to go, but no one knows quite where they are. And I'm not sure that I don't know. I'm not. I'd need to see more information on this. But the idea is that the Ukrainians could have more capacity than people had predicted. I don't know that you would allow that capacity to be ready to attack somewhere else while you're really suffering on this eastern front line. But then the other theory is that actually, as bad as it is here, the Ukrainians are only losing territory in front of their fortification lines, and so they could
Yeah.
happily cede this territory to the Russians and wait until they get back to their fortifications wherever they are, somewhere around here, and then start defending from there, and then possibly have enough troops to do some other funky thing elsewhere. But I don't know
Well,
if
look,
that's a bit pie in the sky.
I just think Ukraine's trying to change the narrative of the war from, build a
Yeah,
fortification, Russians just bomb it, X amount of people die, move on to the next fortification. So if they actually start changing it into a war of mobility, Russia's
yeah,
going to suffer because
yeah.
they don't fight that way.
I totally agree with you. In fact, well, I'm going to leave that until we get onto the Kursk section
Oh,
later.
sorry.
But no, that was me. I went off on the Kursk tangent. Interesting point from Paul here, and this is something that I knew was happening, but I've forgotten about. And actually, I wonder whether this has more importance than we might otherwise think. So, if you remember, Russia has now demonetized. Well, Russia has stopped YouTube in Russia, and actually Google has been fighting back a little bit about that. And so I think the end result is that if you want to make money through Google and you're Russian, you might be in a bit of trouble. And actually, this might have an effect on people trying to support the information warfare that Russia is waging. And so you might have Russians unable now to give the kind of propaganda support that the Kremlin would like, and that might then have a knock-on effect as to how much support there is within Russia for the Kremlin and the war efforts. It's really interesting, Paul. Thanks for posting that. I think that is a point that needs to be considered there. So anyway, moving on. Where was I? I was here. Yeah. Okay, so Kursk, just getting to where I was. Right, okay. Then something else on Kursk here, which is conscripts from Siberia are being prepared for the transfer to the Kursk region. So this is a bit military aidy, a bit actually, I should really have put that in the Kursk section. But yeah, conscripts are not ideal for trying to stop an invasion into your country. You want well-trained, experienced troops that have the requisite equipment. I don't think that's really happening. So yeah, Russia. I've again long said that this war has seen a constant degradation of the Russian military capabilities, and that is surely going to bite at some point. So, you know, Russia has every day and every week and every month been attrited in terms of material and well-trained troops. Yes, they will gain troops with experience over time fighting, but essentially every week and month is a degradation of their capabilities because they cannot build enough stuff themselves of good enough quality, and they cannot get given it by other people. So they are going down. as every week and month the Ukrainian capabilities, their equipment is being upgraded. So they are cycling through their BMP-1s and they're being replaced by Marder's, and in fact they're going to be starting to produce their own Fuchs APCs and Lynx IFVs. They're getting Bradleys from the US, etc., etc. So you're getting this constant asymmetry taking place. So Russia's position is always going to get worse unless they are able to be given directly weaponry from places like China. It's the only way of seeing Russia reverse that asymmetry. So, Russia have to do everything now. And I think, signing conscripts up to go and fight in Kursk is another sign that I think Russia is the lobster boiling in a pot at the moment, and they're in a much worse position than people might otherwise give them credit for being. But I'm very cognizant I could be being way too positive here about where Ukraine are. Any thoughts on that?
No, definitely not. I mean, China's indicated that they're only going to partially support Russia in the war if they can make money out of it, which is understandable. India's the same. Iran's making a pile of money selling equipment to Russia, but as soon as the money dries up, no one's really interested in Russia's war, because, and I really think it's probably messed up a lot of other countries' plans. The West had been dropping the ball for 10 years before this, and Russia was the first one who jumped in both feet first. But if you think China might have been getting right ready to do whatever they wanted to do, but now they can't. The West has woken up. The industrial backbone of the West is starting to go back to making weapons. And I really think there's a lot of world leaders out there thinking, "Oh, I'm not particularly happy with Putin."
Yeah. Someone talking about does anyone know where there's talk about
Sarah was saying the 14 brigades.
Yeah, there is both. Does anyone know where the 14 brigades are? There's also conversation going on about where are the Abrams. Are they not being given Abrams because of Chobham armor, which is the English armor on Abrams? My position is that Ukraine doesn't really need Abrams and main battle tanks. I think they need Bradleys more than they need main battle tanks.
And the armor's outdated now.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that'd be useful. But if the US are going to give any, for example, US or any country really, they're going to give any kind of mechanized equipment, I think tanks would be further down the list, and you're more likely to get, say, old Leopard 1A5s upgraded than maybe, I don't know, maybe Abrams. Although it wouldn't surprise me if the US gave just another bunch of Abrams, maybe another 30 Abrams or something like that, just keep them ticking over. But I would put Bradleys. Bradleys have been so effective, and the Ukrainians do appear to really appreciate them and are using them well as well. So
you only really need tanks against tanks unless there's fortified positions you're attacking.
Yeah.
So if you want higher mobility, then the tanks really aren't what you want on the front line.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, as a soldier or something, seeing a tank, trundle down the road towards you would be kind of terrifying. But yeah, you get a striker or something like that in there, it's probably going to catch you more unawares and catch you out.
Yeah, when you've got the mobility of a Bradley and the ability to take out a tank with a tow missile on top, then I think you've got a more versatile vehicle, because the Bradley can fit a bunch of people in and do somewhat what the tank can do. And we keep seeing, so actually but just before I go on, actually go to your end. Hi JP, I'm happy to finally catch you live. It's the first time I've been able to comment, but I've been watching all your content for more than 2 years now. Thank you for your amazing work, keep it up. I love lurkers and people who have just been watching for ages and then finally like, oh, hello, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know you were here, type thing, for that long. I just love that. Anyway, so going back to this American aid package, almost certainly in this aid package will be TOW. They're what they optically wired, tube-fired, optically wired missiles, the ones they have on the top of Bradley, where they're not fire and forget, that you have to look at them and the wire connects it to when it then blows up, whatever it blows up. Now, we have seen TOW missiles on every single American aid package for the last whenever, right? And what this tells us is that they are using a lot of those missiles. And that tells us, my opinion, pure speculation, I'm not a military expert, but I suggest that the Ukrainians are using Bradleys like tanks. So if they need all those missiles, and I haven't seen many vehicles blown up by TOW missiles, by the way. I've seen a few. There is some footage of Bradleys taking out some vehicles with TOW missiles, but my guess is they're using those like you would use a tank to blow up bunkers and positions, and not the sort of thing that you would catch on camera an awful lot. But if they're needing TOW missiles so often, every package, then they're using them a lot. And if they're using them a lot, I think the Bradley is being used as a tank. And so therefore, to go back to where are all the extra Abrams, I'd actually think that they just probably need more Bradleys. Going on, Ukrainians have, this is quite a, I don't like scamming. I don't like dishonesty in any kind of way, but this gives me some kind of weird joy. Ukrainians have scammed the Russian mill bloggers, two majors. So two majors is a Telegram channel and a bunch of mill bloggers that I refer to quite often. And they've been scammed out some Ukrainians by 1 million rubles. On August the 9th, two majors announced a collection for fighters in the Kursk area, including 7 Mavics drones for a total of 1.8 million rubles. Ukrainians contacted the fund and convinced them that they could promptly deliver the Mavics, but an advance payment was required. It sounds like the sort of scam my dad a bit fall into. On August the 13th, the head of the two majors with over 1 million followers on Telegram transferred 999,990 rubles to the account of the fictitious company OOO Digital RS RUS. On August the 20th, the unit of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recorded a video with the words of gratitude for the purchased equipment. Ow, that's so painful. But yeah, brilliant. Good stuff, Ukrainians, clever. Anyway, moving on to geopolitical stuff now. So we're going to start with marking the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. Switzerland invites all members of the UN Security Council to a special event to, quote, reaffirm the role of humanitarian law, writes Tim White. Of the 15 members, only Russia has not accepted the invitation. Who knew that Russia wouldn't be interested in celebrating humanitarian law? Because Russia. And yes, by the way, Fifi, Barbara, that's the first thing I thought. Anyway, moving on.
The invitation was probably directly to Putin.
Yeah. As Russia bombs a Ukrainian hospital, Modi hugs Putin, then plans Kiev visit. India's strategic autonomy is under fire. So, okay, we have Modi visiting Kiev, has visited Kiev today. So here's a little bit of a precursor before we talk about the visit. Shashi Tharoor, a former UN official and Indian minister, sees Ukraine visit as a bid to salvage reputation. So what explains Modi's behavior? So on the one hand, being really matey with Russia, and on the other hand, coming over to Ukraine and visiting Zelensky. 86% of Russia's military equipment is Russian-made, with spare parts crucial. India buys 40% of its weapons from Russia, complicating its stance on the Ukraine war. Interesting that they are buying less and less, I believe, from Russia, partly because Russia can't supply anything, because it's all going to the war, and partly because it's a bit crap, as the war has shown. So that is changing. India is also manufacturing more of its own stuff, same with China. So those two nations traditionally bought an awful lot from Russia. They're now turning away from Russia, partly due to their own economic strategic positioning, but also because this war has meant that it's not easy for them. Yet India doesn't fully back Russia. Modi's Kiev visit on today underscores India's delicate balance, maintaining Russian ties while nurturing Western partnerships as China tensions rise. Okay, so here he is, Modi, getting off the train, because that's the only way you can get into into Ukraine. Indian PM Modi arrived in Ukraine to meet President Zelensky, and that he has done today. And they met with a hug. Now, this was important because Modi famously hugged Putin, and that was highly controversial. And everyone's like, but Putin's a wingnut. What are you doing? Wingnut is a euphemism for complete bastard. What are you doing? So there's no point using a euphemism because I just called him a complete bastard. Anyway, I digress. Modi hugged Putin, and people are like, what are you doing? So I was fully expecting Zelensky, who's quite a huggy kind of guy, to hug Modi, and lo and behold, they hugged on arrival and departure. Now, Tim White says, as India's official visit to Ukraine continues, the restoration of good trade relations had to be promised. However, no mention of Modi and the Indian state starting to enforce international sanctions against Russia. And I think that's unlikely to happen, to be perfectly frank. And then Tim White later says the PM of India has ended his historic visit to Ukraine. A lot of pomp and ceremony, documents have been signed, but is there any real progress? And I guess we won't really know straight away. But there is talk that Ukraine and India have agreed on 4 documents of cooperation, according to Zelensky himself. We're talking about medical sector, cooperation in agriculture, humanitarian relations, and culture. Quote from Zelensky, we look forward to India being able to join the joint communique of the inaugural summit. So is that the peace summit he's talking about? I presume India haven't yet signed it. Now, India has overtaken China in purchases of Russian oil, according to Reuters, citing sources. A bit of a spoonerism there. Russian crude accounted for 44% of India's total oil imports last month, reaching a record 2.07 million barrels a day. That was up 4.2% from June and 12% the more a year ago. This figure exceeded the volume of all imports by China from Russia in July. So we have seen exports from Russia to China dip recently, which amounted to 1.76 million barrels per day. According to newspapers Interlocutor, India's demand for Russian oil will continue to grow as long as there is no further tightening of sanctions. So I think, as we all understand, and as you know, I think Matthew's saying, India is going to be all about the money. And that's kind of understandable if you are saying that morality takes a second place to economics, then that is what you're going to see. Any thoughts on India at all?
Actually, I was interested that on the train, Modi was using the ramp to get off the trains, because the trains in Ukraine have usually quite a large step down. But I don't know if you noticed that, but Modi, when he actually got off the train, you go see the ramp behind him, he actually went down the ramp, and you don't. I was wondering if that's an indication of his age or something.
I was thinking he looked a bit older, by the way, and yeah, but I hadn't thought of that. Yeah,
I don't know. I
nice
just
spot.
noticed it and thought,
Yeah.
okay, that's a bit interesting.
Yeah,
Because they are a big step down.
Yeah.
You normally end up, when you're on the train in Ukraine, you're endlessly helping all the mothers on and off the train with their prams and luggage and things like that.
I think you find the mothers are helping me off the train normally, but there you go. Right, so Tendar says another major defeat for Russia and Putin. The strategic Russian pipeline project, Power of Siberia 2. So this is this long-touted pipeline going through Mongolia. Power of Siberia 2 has been effectively stopped indefinitely. The government of Mongolia announced their strategic economic plans for the years 2024 to 28, in which Power of Siberia 2 has been completely left out. Mongolia is a vital transit country for this pipeline project. Therefore, it is unlikely that this Russian pipeline project will be finished anytime soon, if ever. This news is entirely suppressed in Russia, and with good reason. Power Siberia 2, which was supposed to connect the Jamal gas fields with China, was Putin's attempt to balance out the losses Russia sustained from the destruction of Nord Stream 1 and 2, as well as the major losses in gas revenues in Europe. It is making an already difficult situation for Gazprom, and remember, Gazprom made record losses this last year, worse. According to Harvard expert Craig Kennedy, Gazprom is already $82 billion in debt. News like this is a very good indicator as to how Russia's economy and political influence has deteriorated since the full-scale war against Ukraine 2.5 years ago. Now, this goes back to the lobster boiling in a pot analogy and the screws turning. I genuinely think the screws are turning on Russia, and I am afraid that I'm being too positive, but it's stuff like this that makes me think that Russia is in a lot more trouble than like I said before, we might otherwise have thought. I think economically, if you're talking about the wage inflation in spiral and due to the labor shortage, the brain drain from people, like particularly in the IT sector, running away from the country, and also IT sanctions. So there is now going to be a degradation of the knowledge base in Russia, where the experts are going elsewhere to get jobs in decent jobs. Like, you will get Russia long-term degrading its IT ability. Then you've got the ruble tanking, exchange rates issues. You've got reserves being chomped through. All these things I said in my video earlier today. Then you've got all the military issues. So you've got the materiel degradation, like I talked about earlier, the personnel degradation, literally like human lives being lost, and then the cost of compensating families, the cost of the war in those respects, the cost of the war in material that they are having to construct, refurbish, buy, or replace eventually, etc., etc., etc. You've got Russia becoming a pariah state, so the political cost of this, and then that affects trade deals, and you know, if Russia can't go and do deals with Europe and with the US and with some of these other entities, then they have to go and do deals with China and Japan. But China and India. But China and India know that they're in the power position, so they will screw as much out of Russia as they possibly can, because Russia are desperate and they have no one else to go to. So all of this means that Russia is in a worsening and worsening position, and it's surely going to eventually spell the end of Russia as we know it in the form it's in, is my opinion. But that's overly positive. Any thoughts before I go on?
No, I just can't wait until they get sunk. And look, just while we're actually on that, before the war started and throughout the USSR times, the brains always came from Ukraine. So when we talk about the brain drain from Russia, I know my wife worked in Russia as an engineer. I've worked in Russia as an engineer. You know, my brother-in-law was doing payment systems for Moscow's underground. What do they call it? The metro there. You know, that so much expertise is actually coming out of Ukraine for Russia. Russia can't do it by themselves. You know, they would have been a failed country if it wasn't for the oil and gas.
Yeah, and remember that with the sanctions, the hydrocarbons industry is itself hamstrung, so it can't produce or maintain. It can't produce new installations, particularly. It can't maintain the ones they've got, because those companies involved, corporations involved in maintaining them, have pulled out Russia and are no longer working with Russia. And so it is in a fragile, precarious position. It's my opinion. Germany's reportedly investigating espionage drone flights over critical infrastructure. This has been going on for some time, actually. Several European countries have in recent months reported numerous cases of espionage and sabotage suspected of being carried out on the behest of Russia. And then this has come out today. This is in the Financial Times. A NATO military base in Germany has been placed on high alert due to the potential sabotage threat from Russian agents, according to the FT. So, goodness me. And it's stuff like this. It's when Russia get caught doing sabotage that it gives more ammunition to the West not to appease Russia. Sometimes Russia, I think, don't do themselves any favors. Like, if I was, there were certain things that happened recently where I've thought, Russia, why would you do that? Surely that anything that's going to make people go, oh man, Russia suck, is going to allow countries to provide aid and get more public backing more often. So yeah, they're not very clever, I don't think. Sometimes what they should have done, my opinion, has been they shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. They should have spent all the money that they've spent on the war on troll farms and bot farms, and just disrupted economies and democracies around the world that way, rather than trying to actually invade countries to do that.
They could have spent all the money on the war on their own country and made it a nice place to go. And then
Attract people there.
would actually go there, you know.
It's so it sounds so obvious, Matt.
It does.
The USA has expanded anti-Russian sanctions. So again, like turning that screw, adding 400 people to the legal entities in Russia and abroad to the list. The White House has also said that the US will announce a new arms package for Ukraine on Friday. And I guess that is the one that we've already talked about. Now, Exit 266 here says the Howard Buffett so Warren Buffett, super rich philanthropist, who has spent now the many years basically thinking how to spend his money nicely. Well, his son Howard Buffett, who is himself is fairly old these days, is likely the largest private organization. So the Howard Buffett Foundation is likely the largest private organization funding Ukrainian agriculture right now, and this is a well-deserved award. So, in fact, when you look at both what the Soros, and I know some people don't like George Soros because they are fed with disinformation about how terrible he is and how liberal and blah, blah, blah. But actually, when you look at the organizations that have given privately the most money to Ukraine, it's Soros and Buffett. And those two have given it a phenomenal amount of money. Now, Zelensky says, it's an honor for me today to award Ukraine's true legends. We said, as we all know, there's only one legend of the multiverse, and you're looking at him now. We celebrate all those who strengthen and inspire. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, that would just sound like I'm being a right knob. We celebrate all those who strengthen and inspire our warriors daily. These are people who glorify Ukraine by enhancing our defense and inspiring all Ukrainian citizens. That's really good stuff to see the private sector coming together, or philanthropists coming together and really helping Ukraine in meaningful ways with an absolute ton of money that is hopefully sustainable as well. It's not just like, you know, you're teaching a man to fish rather than giving him a fish. You know, helping the agriculture sector thrive allows Ukraine to, rather than just giving a load of I don't know, food to Ukraine, allowing the agriculture sector to thrive and be sustainable going forward sounds like a good option to me. Right, we are just going to go to, I need to just share differently. Is there anything else you want to add to anything I've said, mate?
Nope, that's it. I was just looking confused at what was popping up on the screen there when you were Trump confusing Zelensky and Putin.
That's what I'm going to.
That's what my face was on. Going what?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to go to next, because I think this is super important. So camera Harris DNC, this one. Okay, because I can't share things with volume, with audio, the way I just was. So hopefully you can you see this? Can you see what I'm doing now?
Yep, I can.
Okay,
yep.
So right, we're going on to some US politics as it pertains to Ukraine, and this is something that I reported yesterday. So in an Arizona rally, we had Donald Trump talking. I talked about this yesterday, that he just lied and said that Kamala Harris visited Putin. Harris has never met Putin. And so he said this again on Fox News. And interestingly, Fox News did a sort of fact check on this as well afterwards, which is interesting, that actually you're starting to see Fox News call out Donald Trump. But this is an incredible bit of misinformation about, in this case, his opposition.
We're going to end up in World War III because she's incompetent. Biden sent her. Russia would have never happened with Ukraine if I were president. Israel, the attack on Israel would have never happened. Iran had no money. They had no money to give to Hamas or Hezbollah. But let me tell you, and a little known fact, and the press doesn't want to talk about.
And it's a little known fact because it's not a fact. It's little known because no one knows it, because it didn't happen, what he's about to say. I presume you can hear this, by the way.
Yep.
Biden sent, I call her Comrade Kamala, sent Comrade Kamala to see Putin in Russia.
No, he didn't. That's literally never happened.
3 days before the attack, she went, she said, she gave her case. He attacked 3 days later. He attacked 3 days later. He laughed at her. He thought she was a joke. Now he's real.
So he said that Harris had visited Putin, which didn't happen. Harris visited Zelensky.
Wasn't he in the Winter Olympics at that time anyway?
It's like it didn't happen. Like she's never met Putin. So therefore, when he's saying all this stuff about he laughed at her, that is fabrication. It's a lie on top of a lie. And what annoys me is there are probably low information voters who believe this, but this is an outright fabrication that is egregious. Like you should not be allowed to lie about your opposition. That's like, imagine I was running for Prime Minister in the UK and I was running against you, Matt, and I just said, oh yeah, do you know that Matt is a convicted paedophile or something like that? And like, and like then that would spread like wildfire, and then people's opinions of him would be terrible, and then he rightfully go, well, hang on, you can't just do that, and hopefully take me to court. By the way, that's not true.
I just come back with, I've got nice hair.
But just like yeah, point taken. But you just can't do that. You shouldn't be able to do that. And yet here we have someone just being able to do that.
He attacked 3 days later. He laughed at her. He thought she was a joke. Now he's really laughing when he sees her. Can you imagine her negotiating with President Xi of China, with Kim Jong-un of North Korea? The whole thing is like we're living in a fantasy land.
Absolutely right. You are living in a fantasy land. That is definitely what's happening. So this is a real problem because it's not true. Like you can talk about this in terms of US politics in and of itself, but this is not about that. This is about Ukraine. Like just throwing out when we're fighting Russian disinformation, it becomes really depressing when like a presidential nominee is coming out with a disinformation that is on the same sort of scale. It really is depressing. And then anyway, Fox News did actually come out and try and fact check this, although it was the weakest fact check I've ever known. But let's try and I'm going to have to refresh that because it's not liking it. Here we go.
Living in a fantasy.
We don't have yeah, and just as a quick clarification, we don't have confirmation that the vice president went to Russia to meet with Vladimir Putin. I know she went over to Europe right before the incursion when Russia invaded Ukraine, and it's a war that's still going on right now.
I've heard that said a lot. You don't have confirmation that that's true?
No.
I've heard that said a lot, she said. So it's been said a lot, and it's a lie. You don't have confirmation? No, I don't have confirmation. Whereas I would have been like, that's BS. Like, it's not like I don't have confirmation. It didn't happen. Like, I don't have confirmation.
I don't know if the vice president ever met Vladimir Putin.
There. Well, at least he did call Trump out to some degree there. And the final bit of audio I'm going to play you, or video, is Kamala Harris's speech. We're not going to play the whole thing, just the bit that's pertinent to Ukraine. What's really important here, so if you are big supporters of Ukraine, and if you're Ukrainian, you're looking at what the rhetoric is of both sides here. So Trump and Vance. Vance is deeply anti-Ukraine, and Trump and Trump's son are anti-Ukraine. Really, like the rhetoric doesn't tell you anything other than they are Russian appeasers and somewhat anti-Ukraine, at least. So if this is really important to you, like you need to measure up one side against the other. So now we have, in what was an absolutely humdinger of a speech, she nailed everything she needed to nail in this speech. We have Kamala Harris talking at the National Convention, the Democratic National Convention, and saying this.
And America, we must also be steadfast in advancing our security and values abroad. As Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world.
And by the way, if you were ever worried about Kamala Harris and her ability to do stump speeches and her ability to do teleprompter talking. She has nailed that skill now. The cadence there is brilliant, and the way that she brings that up to a crescendo, talking about national security and her, boys abroad. I think, there are so many elements of this speech. I'd love to just do another analysis of a speech like I did with Tim Walz the other day, but it's absolutely nailed here. And what's also really important about this is she'd spent the time going through her bio at the beginning to introduce who she is, but also to communicate values through her bio. Then she went on to domestic stuff and domestic policies. What's important here, because there's been a real absence on both sides with regard to foreign policy. And this is one of the first times for a long time that we've heard explicit foreign policy talk here. I know Adam Kinzinger did it in his speech before her. But you're building up to foreign policy rather than sidelining foreign policy. And I think this was an important way of communicating this. So it's built up to this, and then it gets tied all up at the very end of her speech. But it's good to see her giving prime time focus to foreign policy.
And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice. I will make sure.
And like I talked about before, there was it was Tim Miller was saying that you would never have ever heard chants of USA at a Democratic convention before. This is now as a permission structure for the Democrats to reclaim patriotism here, which I think is interesting.
That we lead the world into the future on space and artificial intelligence, that America, not China, wins the competition for the 21st century, and that we strengthen, not abdicate, our global leadership.
Brilliant point.
Trump, on the other hand, threatened to abandon NATO. He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. And as president, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies.
So here you have her talking about NATO and Ukraine, and very forcefully talking about this, and enthused by the importance of this. That I think this is super important, and I'm really glad that she did this, and I think she sounds like a commander-in-chief there, but that's my opinion.
With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I...
And she goes on to talk, and actually does a really good job of navigating that very difficult line with the Gaza conflict there. Anyway, I'll leave it there because this is about Ukraine more than Gaza. But I thought that was impressive, and it was really good to see her talk about Ukraine forcefully and her a continued support for Ukraine. Any thoughts from you, Matt?
I was going to ask, do you watch Planet America?
No.
The ABC channel. I think twice a week they do a show on the American politics. It's an Australian show, but you should really look it up.
Is that the one? Okay, carry on.
Oh no, yeah, the little one I
did
said
it do it on the? Did it do it on? Did they have a documentary, a couple of part documentary on Trump recently? That I think I saw some of that, which was excellent.
They possibly could have done. They have like 40-minute shows.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Twice a week, but they are just really good at analyzing. Way beyond anything that I can ever do for the whole political bit. The way that they were actually going through Oh, Smith is saying chat is iffy. Definitely, especially in his comedy days. You know, they're going through the way Obama's actually came in and set everything up, and the Clintons came in and set everything up, and actually the structure of the rally.
You're absolutely right.
Which
So
should be interesting.
I could wax lyrical about the structure of the rally, and it was the most supremely polished. Some of the speeches went over. That's maybe a bit of a complaint, but it was a really well polished, and the music that went alongside with the roll call, it was all just incredible. There was a huge difference between the RNC and the DNC.
I've got to just read out Rattus 9000's comment. Obama's dick
on
joke was
Obama's,
fucking perfect.
Yes. So he did do that. Was an absolutely brilliant part of his speech. Just to someone, it was Kevin who said, "Can you actually play the Adam Kinzinger's speech?"
Yeah.
I won't play his speech, but I will do it at some point, actually, Kevin. Just not in this one, but because I haven't teed it up and whatnot. But I think it is really important, and it's well worth. And the good thing about his speech and some of those other people that talked, some speeches were long. Some speeches were really nice and short. His was a really good, concise speech. But he said here, GOP former congressman, so this is a Republican, Adam Kinzinger, a very strong supporter of Ukraine, has a primetime speaking slot in the Democratic convention just moments before Kamala Harris accepts the presidential nomination. His references to Ukraine critics received huge boos from the DNC crowd. So this is he did a really good job of talking about national security and showing that, you know, it should be really important and that Trump is not on point there. So what else? So the Kyiv Independent reports that Kamala Harris formally accepts Democratic nomination for president, saying she will stand strong with the Ukraine. So they're happy with that, stand strong with the Ukraine and our NATO allies. And then, yeah, I've already done that. So now what we're going to do is go on to Kursk. So that's what's happened in the political world. Right. Well, I'm just going to go through a few of these super chats and whatnot. Javier Alvarez says, in my opinion, we have passed the point where Russia had the chances for a meaningful victory. It is now Ukraine that have the chance as time is on their side. Right. I did an interview with a panel yesterday with Mesa Gifford and Sean Pinner on Jonathan Fink's Silicon Curtain. And this is exactly what Mesa Gifford said yesterday. His point was that now you've had a switch around and time is now on Ukraine's side and not Russia's side. Now you may disagree with that. It's not overly obvious, but I think you can make an argument that Russia is really up against it, and I think that's why they're trying to throw everything at Pokrovsk and that region in the Donbass to try and at least achieve something. We have Keith Kane saying mobilization has been going on for over 3 months, and Sursky has proven he is a tactician and strategist. He has proven he is a thinker. Kharkiv, then Kursk. Something is brewing. So this is the idea that we were talking about earlier, that, hey, there could be something else happening. There are some missing units that could be being readied for another assault somewhere else. And then Brother Buddha says, do you really think Putin will do a second mobilization, considering how dangerous that is for him? What is the likelihood Putin sees losing some of Kursk as a preferred option? This is a $1 million question, my friend. The answer is I don't know, because you can make a case for, I mean, he has to do a second mobilization. He has to, if he wants to achieve some kind of objective outside of what they've just already got. If he can convince the nation that it's a win to get to go into negotiations to try and get sustainable control over the Donbass and Crimea, then maybe he won't mobilize. But otherwise, he's going to have to mobilize. But it will be suicide. So, yeah, the answer is I just don't know. It's a 50-50. And that's why probably he hasn't made that decision so far, because it is such a difficult decision. Paul Gilbert, thank you very much for the super sticker, super chat there, mate. It will be crayfish, not lobsters in Russia. Interesting. Good bit of Russian knowledge there. Obviously, crayfish are more of a local food stuff than lobster. Zelensky's running out of men and time, says Joe. He's going to have to make a peace deal. Ukraine's casualties are much higher than they are willing to admit. So I don't know who Joe is. He might be pro-Russian.
Joe's I've already banned once for 10 minutes because he just comes on and spouting Russian crap.
Yeah, this is a fair enough point. As in, I would agree that Ukraine's casualties are higher than they are willing to admit, and I think there is an element of spinning stuff so that your own population doesn't get to lacking in morale. So I would admit that the Ukrainians will have lost more than.
Well, they don't admit to any losses.
Well,
so
yeah.
Anything above zero is higher. But I haven't seen too many. I haven't seen too many casualties walking around Ukraine. You know, from a lot of the footage that I get back, I don't see a lot. So obviously, I'm not in Ukraine at the moment, but I do get a lot of footage from friends coming back, and I'm not seeing anywhere near the number of, amputations or anything like that. That's happening on the Russian side.
So Joe's point here, I would agree with all of this actually. So, but hear me out. So Zelensky is running out of men, and he is running out of time. I don't agree with he's going to have to make a peace deal, though. That's a bit I don't agree with. Ukraine's casualties are much higher than they're willing to admit. So those 3 points I agree with. Zelensky is running out of men and time. However, Russia is running out of men and time to a larger degree than Ukraine at the moment. And so I think that this is a game of chicken and who will crumble first. And at the moment, I think with the support of the West that Ukraine has to a far greater degree than any support that Russia is receiving from allies, I think Ukraine is more able to sustain this war at the moment for longer. But I might be being overly hopeful there, to be perfectly honest. And it could be, I think Ukraine are in a spot of bother. How long can Russia sustain this? Some people say, you've seen reports that Russia can sustain this war effort for another 2 years. I think that the war effort has to take into account all sorts of things like logistics, oil, all the stuff that we're seeing getting blown up at the moment is going to be harming Russia's ability to commit to this war in a continued fashion. So the Weasel, thank you very much for your super sticker. That's really, really kind of you, my friend. We have Richard Bennett, always a great supporter of the channel. Cheers, Richard. 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. And Javier Alvarez, again, India might be looking at Ukraine as a future arms manufacturer, especially in drones and AI military applications. Really good point. And one of the few positives that comes out of this war, considering there isn't really a lot of positives of being invaded, is that Ukraine will have expertise in certain areas and they will have world-leading expertise. And there is a very good chance that not only will Ukraine be training us going forward, but they'll also be exporting knowledge and equipment in the electronic warfare domain and I think the drone domain as well. Any thoughts from you, mate?
On that one, no, sorry, I was just reading another comment from Joe. Sorry, but I was going to say, Mika was mentioning that Arthur Ray was saying that Ukraine has invaded Bryansk. I heard that yesterday. I haven't seen anything, so I don't know if it's true or not. So.
Yeah, I keep hearing things. There was an attack in. So let's go to the map. So yesterday there was an attack in Kharkiv that people were talking about being, or there was no details, and I think that the implication for many was that this was an attack up into Belgorod, but it was the 3rd Assault Brigade doing some work around here, north of Makivka. So that blue area, the Ukrainians have retaken, and they've done that over the last 4 days with an attack that was supposedly quite well planned. It was risky. It was coordinated. They made some unusual decisions type thing. Don't know the details, but they've ended up taking 2 square kilometers. And this was what was being discussed. But actually, people thought, I think it was a bigger thing than it really was. I mean, that is a good thing. And we might see more of that as the Russians are being pulled from places on the front line other than Kursk. So the Russians are not pulling troops out here because they're having the most success here. In fact, there are claims that they are reinforcing Kursk with extra troops. but they are pulling troops from elsewhere along the front line. Will the Ukrainians have enough capacity to be able to attack, to take advantage of weaknesses in some of these positions? Now, I don't know. I'd have to check the latest sources as to whether Bryansk is being threatened. There are talks that Ukraine are really keen on taking this area to the south of the same river here, as they've blown 3 bridges and 2 pontoon bridges. Actually, there's news that they've blown another pontoon bridge today on the same river, and they are making these moves to the west there. There haven't been too many gains in the last couple of days, so there is potentially the idea that, as you can see, 3 updates to the map, no real changes. So it does look like the Russians are slowing the Ukrainians down. There's a big change back on the, was that the 19th there? Yeah, 19th. So that suggests that they were having more success in the north and to the west, and actually they pulled back from here. But anyway, no real change since then. So maybe they are slowing down here as the Russians are getting their act together.
I'd just go on the other side there, where you're saying like Russia's pushing back, Russia's getting its act together. It's also, a prudent commander will sit there and go, right, we can hold to this point.
Yeah,
we've got no advantage to extending our supply lines.
Yeah, very good point.
So if we just pull back, and we'll make ourselves a nice line with whatever the geography is on the area.
As I've said many times before, the more successful the Ukrainians are in this area, the worse it becomes for them, because they then have a longer front line to protect, and that will be a cause to spread their defenses out more thinly. So actually, there will be an optimal point, and maybe Ukraine are reaching optimal points, or I don't know. There will be a number of objectives. My thoughts on this Kursk attack are this, right? Is that this was all about wresting initiative back from. I'm sorry, people have heard me say this before, but this is all about wresting initiative back from Russia. Now, either you sit back and you defend against Russia ad infinitum, and Russia just causes you to react to them, and they force your hand. But you are never going to win. You are never going to overcome Russia if you're always on defense. So at some point, Ukraine need to wrest back initiative to get Russia to react to Ukraine. So the question is, well, where do you do that? And you then think about what I've said previously, which is, yes, you have at the top of your hierarchy of objectives, you have taking back territory. But underneath that, you have sub-objectives like minimizing your losses in personnel, minimizing your losses in materiel, maximizing their losses in personnel and materiel, hitting their logistics, doing this, doing that. There are other objectives, right? So you're thinking we need to wrest back initiative, but one of our objectives is going to be to minimize our losses, and one of our objectives is going to be to maximize territorial gain. There is nowhere along the front line that you can wrest back initiative and minimize your losses, because all of this is stacked with Russians and fortifications and minefields. So the only place that Ukraine could wrest back initiative and gain territory in meaningful quantity is north of the border, somewhere here. So the question then is, where along here is the best? Maybe that's why they had the Russian volunteer corps going across the border and whatnot, and finding out, getting intel. They were doing shaping operations. They then claimed that the Russians were amassing in Kursk as well as they were in Belgorod, so they could bring up defensive forces here and get away with hiding an offensive force by pretending it's a defensive force, and then doing a surprise attack. You can not get a surprise attack on the front line down here. It's just too many drones. There's too much going on. So you can't get the surprise attack. You will get attrited. You will lose your troops and equipment at unsustainable levels. You will take only minimal amount of ground back, and you probably won't even wrest back initiative that much. That is why they attacked into Kursk. Now, all things like getting conscript prisoners and loads of them, those are added benefits, but they wouldn't have been part of the planning, I don't think. Or they might have been part of the planning for not losing as many troops, because they know that the troops here are weak. They are fighting between units. The FSB are trying to take over. Is it the FSB, the Border Guard, the conventional forces? Yes, these are conscripts, poorly trained, low morale, poorly equipped young 18-year-olds who, if they get captured or die, their parents are going to go up in arms back to the Kremlin. So there are loads of advantages for attacking around here. The Russians are weak. You are going to take a lot of land, and they have taken a lot of land compared to what they would have done had they piled all of those troops into Pokrovsk. Any thoughts, mate?
Oh, God, I just got tied up in the comments again. I was just going to go back and double down on my original one of, the invasion only had to be 40 kilometers into Russia. It really puts Russia in a terrible, terrible position. They're going to have to send 20, 30, 40,000 troops up there, a lot of equipment. Then they're going to punch south. That is the logical thing to do, because Russia's got to go all the way around and Ukraine just has to go 2,000 kilometers, is it? 1,400, I can't remember. But it's not that far. You could actually do the journey in one day, or we used to be able to drive from Kharkiv down in one day. So yes, not most comfortable for the soldiers, and you obviously want more of a break. But
you're talking like getting up from there to there, whereas the Russians would have to go, from
they have
here
to go all the way around.
there.
And no, you're talking main roads for the Russians. Look, follow the main roads. They're going out, down, around.
Yeah.
And
Like
most of their
that,
equipment is going to have to go on a train. So you've got the time it takes to load a train, the limited number of trains they can use. Yeah. As soon as they get the Russian equipment up there, I suspect they might just, form up on the river. That's a nice, convenient defensive line. And then just move most of the troops straight down south and just punch as hard as they can.
And the other benefit for fighting here as well is that, and this is a really significant benefit, is that all the fighting is taking place in Russia. All the damage it gets done to this area is Russian damage to Russia. All the bombs that Russian aviation are dropping and Ukrainian aviation are dropping, all the artillery that's getting sent in is destroying Russian infrastructure. If you took the fight to Russia anywhere else around here, you're damaging your own country. And you are leveling cities of your own, on towns of your own. Having that fight up here, there are so many benefits to what Ukraine have done to attacking into Kursk. The question is what they do now.
Russia's going to go, because we know the way Russia's going to be. There's going to be unexploded ordnance in that area for the next 10 years.
Yeah,
that the Russian people are going to be stepping on. So
yeah,
the pollutions to the rivers, all that type of thing.
Neil S says, will the Ukrainians hold a referendum in the Kursk region like the Russians have done in their territory? I think they've already done that, haven't they? There's some referendum that's just happened recently with the Kursk independence or something. But yeah. So I think there are loads of advantages. I could wax lyrical for a long time about Kursk. The question is what you do now. So do you defend everything you've taken? Do you fall back to more defensive positions, or do you completely fall back to the border when the Russians do finally come at you with enough troops? And then the question is, do the Russians have enough troops to even do any of those options?
I got a question for chat too, because I don't know enough about this. But if you use hovercrafts, can you get over minefields?
I don't know. Probably. It depends what type of mines they are.
Chat?
If they're pressure mines, then possibly. But if they're mines that go off magnetic, with
but
metal.
You don't have. Well, your frame on a hovercraft's aluminium, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it depends how far off. There are lots of ifs and buts. Lots of people have been talking about hovercrafts for a long time. I don't think they're as useful as many people hope because they're quite cool, right? And people are excited by hovercrafts, but I don't think you'd probably see them if they were useful. You would see them more.
I was thinking of the old British military ones that they had in the 80s. The big ones that could carry a couple of hundred troops. Because if you could actually get something that big, just 3 kilometers in dropping off some troops, then you've skipped the minefield.
Yeah. So, okay, in terms of Kursk, so this morning, Putin, or previously Putin's talked about the situation in Kursk region, but he left it last. Talked about Belgorod, Bryansk, and then Kursk. And afterwards, you calmly discuss humanitarian issues without naming what happened and who in Russia is responsible. In other words, they're trying to normalize Kursk, say it's all part of the war, don't worry about it, nothing to see here, etc., which is an attempted very tight control of the information spaces and trying to manipulate the narrative there. Now, we have heard the Pentagon reaffirming Ukraine's right to strike across the border, including into Kursk. US's Lloyd Austin will discuss Ukraine's strategic goals for the Kursk operation with Ukraine's Rustem Umerov, the defense minister, while continuing support through drawdown packages. I imagine the Americans were pulling their hair out. Jake Sullivan's going, no, escalation. Nothing's happened. There is no escalation. And the Ukrainians have gone, see, but we only could have done this if we hadn't told you we were going to do this. So that's why it's so important that the Ukrainians didn't tell the Americans, because the Americans would have stopped them. Right, the thread from Noel reports on the Kursk operation. We have some, what do we have? Let's look at Russian ambassador to Washington, Anatoly Antonov, has stated that Putin has made a decision on how Moscow will respond to the Ukrainian armed forces attack on the Kursk region. So the Russians are giving some kind of vague reaction that they are going to do something, and it's going to cost the Ukrainians lots or whatever. So what else? According to the New York Times, attitudes towards Putin among Russians have worsened since the Ukrainian armed forces began operations in the Kursk region. Data from Filter Labs AI, which analyzed social media posts and news materials, indicates that while support for Putin remains stronger in Moscow, dissatisfaction is growing more rapidly in remote regions of Russia, making military recruitment more difficult. Of course, Moscow would usually be quite liberal and anti Putin. That's traditionally what it's like, but most of those liberals have either fled or been put in gulags. So what else? So Russian propaganda, state media Russia 24 broadcasting a map indicating that Sudzha is under Ukrainian armed forces control. There's still people arguing about Sudzha. This is Sudzha here. It is, I think, all the information points to it being under Ukrainian control now. In fact, there's some maps coming a little bit later. They are building defenses in Kursk at the moment. There are claims of, where are they? Here. So they're dropping these concrete bunkers all over the place in Kursk. Bit of panic from the Russians. Russian authorities set up concrete shelters in Kursk region. No promises to regain lost ground after Ukraine's army incursion. Several hundreds of Russian soldiers south of the Siem River are cut off from supply. Russian war correspondent Alekina reports that the Surovikin line in the Kursk and Belgorod region, so those are the fortifications dug in, were poorly constructed, mainly to spend the allocated billions, making it effectively useless. So they were just building it to spend the money. He also expresses frustration that the Ukrainian commander is more motivated than the Russian, which he finds unsurprising since the war is defensive for Ukraine but expansionist for Russia. That's a really good point there. Just seeing if there's anything there, things getting blown up. This is one. So in the Kursk region, Russian forces are moving in military equipment and reportedly deploying the 56th Air Assault Regiment of the Russian Airborne Forces. The equipment includes 152mm D-20 howitzers, BMD-2, and 3 infantry fighting vehicles and some engineering machinery. So there's quite a lot of equipment here, as you can see as this car drives past. But it's not exactly the newest and best equipment. But there you go. They are bringing in defensive equipment and troops and units. Ukrainian units on the move in the Kursk region. There's imagery of that. Right, now we get on to a little bit of mapping. So here we have fighting is reported near the villages of Kozyrevka and Samaryadove, northeast of Sudzha. Now, this is where I'm going to have to find those places now. So this is Sudzha there. And I'm assuming we have, Kozyrevka here. So I think that's one of the places there. So fighting could be taking place around some of these areas. Northeast, is that Semenovka as well was mentioned. So into the Russian controlled area there. So fighting. So the grey zone is no doubt further to the northeast than Andrew Perpetua's map has at the moment. Samir Dove actually is a different place. This marks a new forward presence by the Ukrainian units. Previously, the Ukrainians were located west of those villages. So that's good news for the Ukrainians there. Then going to the other side of the bridgehead and the salient, we have, as reported in Noel Reports' map several days ago, in line with the expected direction of advance, the Ukrainians are geolocated just outside Kulbaki. So this is somewhere that I've talked about before. Let's go and try and find that again. Kulbaki is this the Kulbaki? No, I don't think it is. I think there's another Kulbaki. That is Kubliki. Anyway, it's somewhere further to, this is what happens if I do it live. I'm not quite sure where some of these places are. Oh, well. I'll find out at some point. Anyway, they are certainly moving. Oh, there's Kulbaki. Here it is. Yeah, so just into the Russian-controlled area, but further on from the Ukrainian control lines there. So advancing eastwards on that front as well. Fighting in the town is probably already underway. So there are still moves in on both sides of that bridgehead, the whole Kursk area, but it's certainly slowing down compared to what we had seen it previously. Then if we just come on, media is reporting that, oh no, that's not for now, that's for tomorrow. That's in the wrong place. So Tender, Russian forces are striking Komarovka, indicating that the village is under Ukrainian control. Furthermore, both sides reported that Martinivka is under Ukrainian army control. So that is over on this right-hand side, Martinivka, and Komarovka on the left-hand side. Now, Martinivka or Martinovka, depending if it's Russian or not, I think, is this place here, which has changed hands a couple of times. I think there's fierce fighting there. It's been Russian, then Ukrainian, then Russian, then Ukrainian. So that's a claim that they control that. And then Komarovka is one of the places that I was just talking about earlier. There it is. So that is apparently under Ukrainian control, according to Tendar. And then finally, on the mapping side of things, Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region took 3 more villages backed by visual evidence. So this is Ruskaya Konopelka. That's a place where, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I referenced it the other day. There was Russian infantry fighting vehicles doing blue on blue, friendly fire on another. Basically, as an infantry fighting vehicle chasing a Ukrainian one, and a Russian one got in the way and sort of started, and the other one started shooting at the Russian one. Anyway, the Russians blew each other up, and the Ukrainians got away with it. So that happened in that place, and this is over on the eastern side there. So he's saying that the Ukrainians are in control of that settlement, quite exactly where that, oh, there it is. So in that area, and that was where the Russian BMP-2 destroyed. That was a blue on blue fighting. That's where the Russians destroyed their own. So the idea is that the Ukrainians control that settlement now, and then it looks like they're making some progress in the Koronovo area here, as again according to Tender. So I'll just finish it in a second here. So Krasnobrodskaya, or whatever that word is, and it's now under Ukrainian control. With the last village, it is now confirmed that Russians south of the same river can only withdraw crossing this river. I don't quite know what that means, but anyway, some success over in this direction and down here as well. And we'll just have to see. I think it's the idea that now the Ukrainians might well be able to make further advance beneath the same river. They've obviously got some villages to contend with. There are different claims as to how many Russian troops are south of the same river, just coming along here. Some saying 700, some saying 1,000, some saying a couple of hundred. I guess we'll see. And maybe the Russians have been pulling out there. I guess that would be fairly wise. Okay, I'm just going to do a few bits of analysis. I hope some of you are still here with me. Ben Hodges says of Daramasiko's analysis story. Do you want to say anything, Matt?
I'm going to run off for 1 minute.
Yep, no worries.
Yep.
You go for it. So Darren Muscott makes an analysis here. Ben Hodges said, not sure I agree with this. Russia has advanced only 50 kilometers from Avdiivka towards Pokrovsk in 6 months at enormous cost. I trust Ukrainian judgment here on allocation of resources. Some observers in the West are more concerned about Pokrovsk than experienced Ukrainian commanders. So this is probably going to be Darren Muscott saying that actually it's quite challenging what they're doing, the Ukrainians, and is it wise for them to do that in Kursk? So the analysis goes something like this. When Ukrainian correlation of forces change in Donetsk with deployments to Kursk, Russian commanders are trained to push forward. That's now happening in Donetsk and Pokrovsk. It's predictable that the Russian response could be exploited if Ukrainian resources are available, but seems stretched currently. And this is going back to what I was talking about earlier with regard to Oliver Carroll's Economist article on Pokrovsk and how the Russians are doing well there. And so the question is, is this a good use of Ukrainian troops? Could they have used all these troops and put them into Pokrovsk and, save Pokrovsk from being taken, or this area of land being taken? Andrew Perpetua talked about this the other day, and I shared that with you. He said this isn't necessarily a manpower problem. Yes, there are exhausted troops that haven't been rotated, so you can certainly rotate troops around there, and that's needed. But actually, this is a fortifications problem. It's a logistics, but there are all sorts of other reasons. It's an equipment problem, and all sorts of other reasons why the Russians are advancing here. But also, they're going between these towns, taking the land between them, and then being able to encircle the towns and so on and so forth. Piling in huge amounts of men into that area might not be the wisest use of those men. So lots of people are worrying about fields and areas being taken in Pokrovsk. My issue would be, my position is that I wouldn't worry too much about that. Wait until they get to the fortification lines, the proper fortification lines. And if the Russians can punch through them, then you've got a problem, right? But round about now, I would be much more in support of Ukraine doing what they're doing in Kursk, with the caveat that we don't know what their overall intentions are for this land, and so on and so forth, as already mentioned. This is someone claiming that another pontoon bridge is being taken out over Kursk. Anyway, so that was some opinions there about how it might be not the best use of their men. But I would agree with Ben Hodges to say that actually the Russians haven't done a very good job in Pokrovsk, and that it has come at an inordinate cost to them.
And you've got to, what we often forget really is you can only put so many men in a trench.
Yeah.
You only want 2 men, isn't it, normally in a forward firing position? And otherwise, an artillery shell is going to take out 5 men or something like that. What a waste.
Well, the other thought is that these proper fortification lines will actually require fewer people to man them, and if they have better underground aspects to them, then the Russians will struggle. And so, Ukrainians are happy enough to cede that land until they get to those fortifications. So it's not as bad as people think, or maybe it is. Like is that too hopey-copey? Now, Ben Hodges again, this is in reply to Jimmy Rushton, who says Ukraine's long-range strike drones and cruise missiles have destroyed 1 Russian ferry, the Comrade Trader, 1 Russian strategic fuel depot at Kavkaz that's still burning, and crippled 3 Russian air bases, Morozovsk, Lipetsk, and Marinovka in a little over 2 weeks. Ben Hodges says Ukraine is conducting multi-domain operations, long-range precision strikes against Russian energy and transportation infrastructure, a land-centric counter-offensive in Kursk that is changing momentum and the info narrative. We should just provide ammo and get out of their way. I totally agree with what Ben Hodges has said there. Now, he's not always been right, Ben Hodges. He was quite bullish about Crimea being taken back. But actually here, I think he is right. And Ukraine are doing everything at the moment to make Russia overstretched and play whack-a-mole. But yeah, Rob Lee, as I mentioned in my first video this morning, this is a quote from Oliver Carroll's Economist article. The hope that Russia might respond by moving troops from Kursk has been supplanted by the realization that it has not. Ukrainian security forces confirm that while Russia has moved troops from other sections of the eastern front line, it reinforced around Kursk. Ukraine, meanwhile, redeployed special forces units to Kursk and is patching up the Kursk front with untested formations. The Russians have figured things out and aren't taking the bait, complains Dublin, who's a fighter in the area. Ukrainian commanders give different reasons for the Russian advance. Some say there aren't enough shells, with the enemy firing up to 10 times as many. Others point to Russian tactics, small infantry assaults, glide bombs, new types of electronic warfare. But exhaustion and manpower issues seem to be at the heart of the collapse. Is it a collapse? I don't know. People aren't made of steel, says Colonel Pavlo Fedosenko. Ukrainian troops outnumbered 4-1 aren't getting any rest, he says. Some stay on the front lines for 30 to 40 days at a time, cramped in foxholes, inches from death. Dublin, a fighter attached to the 59th Brigade southeast of Kursk. No soldiers who have been in place for more than 2 months, too, had strokes. So it's both sides of the coin there. You make up your own mind as to whether you think this is a good use of troops for the Ukrainians. And whether, what to do about the problem of Kursk. Kyiv Independent reports the ISW, Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, saying Ukraine withdraws from positions near Kursk to avoid Russian encirclement. Ukrainian forces southeast of the embattled city of Kursk, Donetsk Oblast, have withdrawn from their positions in the area and avoided being tactically encircled by Russia's advancing troops, according to the ISW yesterday. So there you go. That's it. We still got this, what I think is a game of military chicken, where the Russians are advancing in this area, taking land, but being attrited at tremendous rates. The Ukrainians are advancing in this area and are being attrited, but not at the rates that the Russians are in Kursk, and are taking more land. Who will crumble first? Who will pull forces from one area to support the other area first? So that is the $1 million question. Anyway, that's enough from me whittering on concerning Kursk. What I'm going to do now, mate, is just run through a couple of super chats and whatnot. Is that okay with you, Matt? Is there anything you need to add?
Yep. Nope.
Okay, so thank you very much to Stephen Bendal. If you haven't seen my live chat with Stephen Bendal from Norway, go and check that out on my channel. It's not a live chat, actually. I pre-recorded it, but it was live for us. I mean, we were doing it live. We were alive. So great to not see you, Stephen, but thanks for being here. Finnish guy, Herum Slava. Thank you, my friend. Indeed, Slava Ukraini. Mary M has gifted a Geopolitics membership. Thank you very much, ATP Geopolitics. I appreciate that, Mary. And thank you for Richard Bennett yet again, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics, and not for the first time. I really appreciate that. I don't know who this guy is, and don't know why he's just a legend.
I'm gifting because you got this awesome guy on tonight who's just, yeah.
He's definitely one of the best bishops I've ever met. I was going to do a joke there. I won't. So anyway,
go for it.
No. Thanks, Kevin. I've thanked you already. Thanks, matey. You're such an awesome guy. Mr. Lion Dust gifting an ATP Geopolitics membership. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Lion Dust. Richard Bennett again. Damn it, man. You're a good fella. Tim Momens gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Appreciated. And Mr. Lion Dust back for more, a super sticker as well. Thank you, my friend. Really appreciated. And finally, goodness me, as my voice is just about to go. Thanks again, Jonathan, says Peter Vinker. Greetings from Netherlands. Greetings, my Dutch friend. Excellent stuff from all of you in the live chat. Any particular questions or things of note to mention?
Spartacus was saying John Terry's back in country.
Greg Terry. John Terry.
Sorry, John Terry. Geez.
England footballer.
Yes, disgusting player. Yes.
Yeah, Greg. So I have contacted Greg, and so what had happened, just to let you guys know, because Greg went a bit quiet and I wasn't contacting him much. Not only did I go on holiday, but also I think Greg was finding it very difficult to cope with Pete dying, and he found it very difficult. And so I just let him be, gave him, props and love and whatever, and just let him be. To deal with that. And I think I had thought that Greg had delivered already those snatched Land Rovers. It turns out he's doing that now, because I was under the impression that that's what they were doing when Pete died. And so I think that's my supposition is that's what they were doing, that we all fundraised for, and it was all fantastic and got those snatched Land Rovers. But Pete's death kind of messed that all up, and possibly that's what's happened. And he went back to the US, Pete, and has now gone back out to finish delivering those vehicles. So that's what he's doing now. I have not dropped into any of these lives for ages, so I'm going to have to do that. But he is back in the zone. Go and check him out, and we'll have a chat, no doubt, live at some point soon. I've caught up with him, and that is on the cards. Any nice tan, like thank you very much. My holiday, I do have slightly brown arms, you know. I was beautifully auburn as a kid, not ginger, beautifully auburn, and I do eventually go brown, or all my freckles join up, something like that. Any other points before I wrap this bad boy up?
John Sweeney.
I'd love to get back in contact with John Sweeney and talk to him.
I'd love
Thanks,
to be on
Johnny
that one
Christensen.
just as a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I will contact him again. Thank you very much, Johnny. Always a great supporter of the channel. Thank you very much for your support, guys, and for your questions. Always such an informative and awesome live stream. Thank you, ATV Geopolitics and Matt. Greg was going to Ukraine last time to marry Peter Halina. Interesting. Thanks for that bit of knowledge. Yes, of course. Okay. Well, look, now's probably a good time to let you go to bed, Matt, and let others around the world just get on with their day.
It's only 1 a.m.
Oh dear. Well, I'm surprised I got through this with A, making some kind of sense, and B, not needing to go to the loo, because I did go to the pub with Dell. So another big shout out to Dell and his son Liam. Thank you so much. Big shout out to JR and Benny Pie, who are obviously legends. I'm going to get back to some mapping from like tonight, tomorrow onwards. So hopefully that will be useful for you guys. And has that been released, Jason? By the way, good to see you, Jason. Long time no speak. I was just on Silicon Curtain yesterday, and I talked about that earlier. It's a really good chat, I think. Not myself, but you know, Mesa and Sean Pinner, you know, both who've had experience of being in Ukraine. Sean Pinner, of course, captured and tortured in Ukraine. Yeah, go and check out Silicon Curtain, please. Anyway, a big love to everyone, and Slava Ukraini.
Yeah, and thanks for putting up with me again and the invite. I'll catch everyone sooner or later.
I appreciate having someone to bounce it off.
And get well to Lynn and Mikey.
Yes, really well said, by the way. Thank you for being a human. Lynn and Mikey, get well soon. He prompted me. I wouldn't have remembered because I'm useless, but thank you, Matt. You're a caring guy.
Yeah.
Okay, big love, everyone. Stay on the line, Matt. Take care, everyone. Toodle pips.